You already know you should not eat it. You have known that for years, and yet there you are, standing in front of the refrigerator at 11 at night, pulling out something you swore you would not touch. Or you pass a bakery and the smell hits you and your whole body tilts toward the door like a compass finding north. Or you sit down with one cookie and somehow the sleeve is empty before a single thought crossed your mind. You have probably blamed yourself for this. Weak willpower, poor discipline, a personal failing dressed up in nutritional language. But here is what nobody told you. Your body is not broken. It is working exactly as designed. The problem is that it was designed for a world that no longer exists. The craving you feel for sugar and fat is not a glitch. It is one of the most ancient and perfectly engineered survival systems in the history of life on Earth. And once you understand where it came from, you will never look at your own hunger the same way again. To understand why your body does this, you have to go back. Not just to your grandparents, not just to ancient civilizations, but to the African savanna, roughly 2 million years ago, where your earliest Homo ancestors were facing a problem that had no modern solution: how to survive a world where food was never guaranteed. Evolutionary biologist Daniel Lieberman at Harvard has spent decades reconstructing the nutritional environment of early humans. What he found is that for most of our evolutionary history, sugar was extraordinarily rare. Wild fruit, when available, was seasonal, small, often tart, and never in unlimited supply. Honey existed, but harvesting it meant confronting tens of thousands of stinging insects for a few handfuls of sweetness. Fat was equally scarce. Wild animals are lean. Their meat contains a fraction of the fat found in modern domesticated livestock. A prehistoric human who managed to bring down a large animal would consume every part of it: the organs, the bone marrow, the fat deposits around the kidneys, because those dense caloric sources were survival gold. In that world, the craving for sugar and fat was not a weakness. It was a life-saving signal. Your brain runs on glucose. It consumes roughly 20% of all the energy your body produces, despite accounting for only 2% of your body weight. When glucose levels drop, your brain does not politely suggest you find some food. It screams. It floods your bloodstream with ghrelin, the hunger hormone, and it activates dopamine pathways that make the sight and smell of food feel as compelling as a physical force. This is not metaphor. Neuroscientist Kent Berridge at the University of Michigan has shown that the same dopamine circuits that respond to addictive substances respond to high-calorie food cues. Your brain treats the smell of something sweet or fatty the same way it treats a survival emergency, because for most of human history, it was. The logic of the craving is elegant and ruthless. When you find something sweet, eat as much as you can as fast as you can, because you do not know when you will find it again. When you find fat, consume it beyond the point of comfort, because the winter or the drought or the 3-week failed hunt might be just around the corner. Your body does not know about supermarkets. It does not know that the sugar and fat are available again tomorrow, and the day after, and every day for the rest of your life. It knows only the ancient calculus of scarcity. When you find it, take it all. Psychologist Paul Rosen at the University of Pennsylvania has studied what he calls the pleasantness of sweetness across cultures and found something remarkable. The preference for sweet taste appears to be universal across all human populations regardless of diet or culture, and it is present from birth. Newborn infants who have never tasted sugar make the same facial expressions of pleasure when exposed to sweet flavors. This is not learned. It is not cultural. It is written into your biology at the deepest possible level. The craving was never supposed to be resisted. It was supposed to be obeyed. Now add fat. Dietary fat is the most calorie-dense macronutrient available to a biological system. 1 gram of fat contains 9 calories. 1 gram of carbohydrate or protein contains 4. For a creature living in an environment where calories determined survival, fat was the most valuable substance on Earth. And your brain knew it. The texture of fat in food activates pleasure circuits in ways that go beyond taste. Researchers at the University of Chicago found that fat is detected not just on the tongue but in the gut, through receptors that send direct signals to the brain's reward system. You do not just taste fat, you feel it. Your whole digestive system recognizes it as precious. The combination of sugar and fat together is where the ancient system becomes almost impossible to resist in a modern world. These two substances almost never appear together in nature. Fruit has sugar but almost no fat. Meat has fat but almost no sugar. Mother's milk is one of the only natural substances that contains both in significant quantities. which is precisely why your very first food experience was one of complete neurological pleasure and deep security. When you eat something that contains both sugar and fat simultaneously, your brain interprets it as a uniquely precious resource. It responds with a dopamine spike that far exceeds what either substance would produce alone. Food scientists discovered this decades ago and have been exploiting it ever since. The combination is sometimes called the Bliss Point, the precise ratio of sugar, fat, and salt that triggers the maximum pleasure response with the minimum ability to stop eating. You are not weak when you cannot stop. You are a 2 million-year-old survival machine encountering a substance your ancestors never had to resist because it never existed. But there is something even deeper going on. The craving for sugar and fat is not just about calories, it is about information. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham at Harvard has argued that the shift to cooked food roughly 1 million years ago was one of the most significant events in human evolution. Cooking does something remarkable to food. It breaks down cell walls, predigests starches, and makes nutrients more bioavailable. Cooked starchy roots and cooked animal fat deliver significantly more usable energy than their raw equivalents. Your ancestors, who were most strongly drawn to the smell and flavor of cooked, calorie-dense food, were the ones who extracted the most energy from their environment. They were the ones who survived, they were the ones who had children, and those children had you. The preference you feel is not random. It is the accumulated survival wisdom of 1 million years of ancestors who made the right call every time they smelled something rich and sweet and warm. So what do you do with this? Knowing the origin of the craving does not make the craving disappear, but it does something important. It moves it out of the domain of moral failure and into the domain of biology. You are not a person with bad willpower standing in front of a refrigerator. You are a human animal operating on ancient instructions in a novel environment. The instructions were never designed for abundance. They were designed for scarcity. And they are running in a world that has never, in the entire history of your species, looked like this. Daniel Lieberman argues that the real mismatch is not between you and your willpower. It is between your evolved biology and the food environment that modern industry has engineered specifically to exploit it. The Bliss Point was not discovered accidentally. It was calculated. The craving your body generates was built by evolution over millions of years. The products designed to trigger it were built by food scientists over decades, using that exact knowledge against you. You were not built to resist this. Nobody was. And yet you wake up every morning in that refrigerator world, smell the bakery, feel the pull, and try to make a decision with a brain that is still, at its core, standing on the savannah 2 million years ago, looking at the first ripe fig of the season, knowing it will not last. That is not weakness. That is the most human thing about you.